Hello and welcome everybody to the Pick Six podcast. It's a transfer portal QB Wednesday, along with Tom Shatel, the heavy hitter, and the silver tongue, ever Bland. I'm Sam McKewon. We're talking Husker football. We're going to do a lot of Husker football stuff today. Obviously, the Nebraska volleyball team preparing for its Sweet 16 and Elite Eight volleyball matches, and we wish them the best of luck. We anticipate Nebraska winning those matches. Let's be honest. We may hit a little bit of volleyball, but Nebraska plays Georgia Tech tomorrow, and they will likely play Kentucky on Saturday. And then next week is the Final Four, where the competition gets even tougher. But Nebraska volleyball is elite. We'll have great coverage of that, and best of luck to them. All right, let's get into the football front here. So here we are. We're in the first full week of the offseason. Two players are in the transfer portal, Jake Applegate, and then according to reports, Jeff Sims, the quarterback who Nebraska got out of the portal last year. And the Huskers are in pursuit of a transfer portal quarterback. They've done their due diligence here for sure. We know they've met with Will Howard, Blake Shapen at Baylor, Sam Levitt at Michigan State, likely Kyle McCord at Ohio State, and the Satterfield plane was heading to Pullman, Washington, home of Cam Ward, the Washington State quarterback. That is quite a group of five there. Nebraska appears to be taking a pretty big swing. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. The question is, what can they sell them? I guess I assume they're going to have the money. Do they want to spend it? They need a guy, so I'm sure they'll do what they have to. But I think the quarterback, whoever they get, is got to fit into the team room. It's got to fit into the so-called culture of the. It's got to be a fit in the program, and the offense, whatever that offense is going to be. I don't, for some reason, I don't think people are as worried. Maybe after the Jeff Sims pick as they maybe could be. But I think if you look at the names, you see that who they're pursuing, they all have pretty good reputations. So I don't know. Does that make sense? Should they be concerned after the Jeff Sims was a good guy, a good teammate, but it didn't work out? Would that concern you at all, or?
Well, I think it would be concerning, sure. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get it wrong. And they got it a little bit wrong last year for a variety of reasons, but I would say that some of the guys they're going after now, I would describe all of them, with maybe the exception of Sam Levitt, a better and purer and more traditional passer than Jeff Sims. That I feel confident saying. Okay, Evan, you've been on the transfer portal beat here in the last 3 days. You've been tracking the planes, doing all that stuff. What have you seen in terms of just the kind of player they're going after here at the quarterback position? Let's keep in mind what they have in the system: Chuba Purdy and Heinrich Haarberg, and Danny Kalen's coming, but he's not there yet. And I'd be surprised if he competed for the starting job right away. What would you say the profile of these five guys that we know of so far that they're pursuing is?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me is that there's not necessarily a common thread. I mean, I think Will Howard, he's got the 1 year left. He's probably somewhat similar to Blake Shapen in that they're both guys who have sneaky wheels if they need them, but generally they're known for their accuracy and ability to manage a game. Sam Levitt is on the other end of that spectrum. He's got 4 years to go, redshirted this year, even though he saw a few series against Nebraska. Kyle McCord, I mean, he surprised people by going in the portal in the first place. And that's a guy who I think is more stationary than some of the other players that they're pursuing. And so I'm not sure, how much he would run the same sort of offense that some of the other guys would. The McCord thing's interesting to me, Sam, because you look at his situation. I mean, he was throwing to former 5-star receivers. He was a starter all season at one of the best teams in college football. had the opportunity to do that again, and he enters the portal. And so, like, when I look at that, and I don't know the situation, but to me, I don't see how that could be anything other than money that he's looking for moving into the portal. Because all the other on-field stuff seems to be there. Maybe he's not happy in Columbus or whatever. But that sort of situation, at least on its face, seems to be something that maybe Matt Rule and Nebraska aren't necessarily interested in getting into in terms of a bidding war or whatever. So that one's kind of interesting. And then Cam Ward fits the profile, I think, of what Satterfield had at South Carolina. Dynamic playmaker. Honestly, the same sort of mold of Jeff Sims, a big arm who can make big plays, not afraid to take some risks, things like that. So it kind of feels like they're casting a wide net at this point, which in and of itself is noteworthy when you think about some of the comments that Rule made even a week ago to us about continuing to develop the guys that are in the room and moving forward. I think there was some question to what extent Nebraska would put itself out there into the quarterback portal market, and I think we've seen they're about as aggressive as anybody.
I don't think there's time to get a ton better. I'll have a few thoughts in a minute, but Tom, I wanted you to respond to what Evan just had.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all kind of wondered, how is Matt Rule going to approach the portal? He didn't ever have it at Baylor, and he's a big build it guy, build it from within, maintain the players, retain players. Don't necessarily bring in people that, and I just quote him that he said about Bill Polian, what Bill Polian, the Colts GM, told him that don't ever make a free agent the highest paid guy in your locker room. I mean, I don't think he threw that out there by accident. I think
Right.
he was telling us that, he was telling his team that, his players that, and he was maybe throwing out there for anybody that might want to come to Nebraska, but wants a big payday. So I think there was a big message there. I don't think he's going to get into a giant bidding war, but maybe he wouldn't have to for some guys. I was a little intrigued by the Baylor quarterback. There's obviously a lot of Texas connections on his staff, and Baylor didn't have a very good year, but the kid's stats weren't bad. I mean, he 18 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, over 13 games. But he had a 63% a completion percentage, which is good. So I'm intrigued by a guy like that who may not cost that much. Maybe he would. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff for sure. You had mentioned Joe Gans, I think, in a column last week, and Blake Shapen of the five guys has sort of the Gansian quality. I think he's got a stronger arm than Gans too. I think he was an elite shortstop in high school. Could have signed with a pro team out of high school in baseball. Didn't. I think it affected his recruiting. He was going to go to Arizona State and play baseball and football. Decides not to do that, decides to go to Baylor, then didn't play baseball at Baylor. He's just a football player. Not that there's anything wrong with that. 5,574 career passing yards, 36 touchdowns. He's got 184 career rushing yards. So he's mobile, but he's not a big runner. Will Howard has 5,786 passing yards and 48 touchdowns. Now, people, when they hear the similarities to those two numbers, most people think Will Howard's way better than Blake Shapen, but if you just heard the numbers there, you're going to hear that they're a little different. Now, here's the big difference, though. Will Howard ran for 921 yards and 19 touchdowns at Kansas State. So he can run, and he ran for 351 yards this season. It's possible that he will follow his offensive coordinator, Colin Klein, to Texas A&M. Did somebody interject there? I didn't want to interrupt anybody.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
No, but I was surprised to see Colin Klein go to A&M. I think a lot of K-State people were too. Maybe that just means he needs to get his resume filled out a little bit before he becomes a head coach. But yeah, maybe I think Will Howard would fit the bill. I mean, I think he'd be right in line with the kind of offense they want to do, or at least what I saw this year. So who knows? Nebraska sent Adrian Martinez to K-State. Maybe they'll send one back.
Maybe. Cam Ward threw for 6,968 yards and 48 touchdowns in 2 seasons at Washington State. He ran for 202 yards, but he ran for 13 touchdowns. So he is a runner in the red zone for sure. And then Sam Levitt's stats are mild at best. He's the guy that we don't know a ton about other than, the tools that he appears to have. Kyle McCord, the high school teammate of Marvin Harrison, threw for 3,170 yards this year, 24 touchdowns. I think 16 of those were to Harrison, something like that. And he lost 77 yards on the ground. He is not in any way, shape, or form a runner. Evan, what I think is happening with McCord is I think he's been told that he's going to have competition, and maybe was even told he's not going to be the starter. And so I think he's being pushed out at Ohio State.
Okay.
We're nudged out. Like, hey, you know what? We love what you've done for us, but we're bringing in competition. I'm guessing that Ryan Day wants more mobility out of that position than McCord provides. And I think Cam Ward may be their top target. I think that's entirely possible. That Washington State's Cam Ward is the guy that Ohio State wants. Nebraska's going to try to make a run at him. Ward is he's a passer. He was an incarnate Word prior to Washington State. I am a little surprised that Nebraska's going after him. I think he's going to cost a lot of money. And so Nebraska must feel comfortable with what it has. And he only has the 1 year left. And so he would be a one year fix. What I'll say is, and again, I don't have any inside information when I say this. I'm going based on my instinct and what I sense about the sport. Nebraska does not have 3 or 4 years to go 5-7, 5-7, 6-6. Okay, now we're going to go 10-2. The schedule's too hard to just say we're just gonna build it with a bunch of freshmen and don't worry, in year 4 we'll have it done. They have a stadium to fund. It would behoove them to be good next year. And by good, I don't mean, squeaking into the bowl. I mean going 9-3 for a variety of reasons. And they had an opportunity this year to do the 6-6 thing and make everybody feel good and go to a bowl game, and everybody's got the nice booster seats at the bowl game and do that thing. And they fell short of that. And so I feel like I do think they have to get better at that position, and maybe considerably better at that position. But to do that, like Rule said, it's going to cost some money. And, are these 5 guys all better than Chubba Purdy? I don't know. Are they? I think 4 of them are. I think 3 of them are. I wonder about McCord, and we don't know anything about Levitt. Not really. We just don't know.
Well, I mean, Levitt's kind of what Purdy was a couple of years ago. He was a guy who was highly recruited out of high school, who had a bunch of years of eligibility. So, I mean, he's essentially, you kind of look at him almost like a freshman, really. I mean, he's played a handful of snaps last year. But, yeah, I mean, the quarterback situation, you got to get it right. And it's pretty easy to imagine, Kyle Howard or Will Howard was quarterback in Nebraska this year. Imagine Blake Shapen was quarterbacking Nebraska this year. How many more games do they win? Probably 3. They might win 3 more games if they had a guy who just took care of the football and threw the ball where it needed to go and picked his spots in the run game. And I think they get that. And that's why I think the Cam Ward thing's a little bit intriguing too, because when Nebraska went in the portal a year ago, I think there was this thought that, well, the defense is going to take a little time. And so you need to take a risk on a guy who has high upside and maybe some high risk as well. And I think, what we learned was they don't need to do that. That's not necessarily the recipe for winning at Nebraska, given the conditions, given the strength of what the defense has been and looks to be next year. You need a guy who's accurate with the ball, makes good decisions. And then you can lean on your offensive line and the run game and whatever else. So I wonder how much of the Cam Ward piece is Marcus Satterfield kind of going back to what he's comfortable with, what he had at South Carolina, what he's comfortable running in a general scheme sense. That's why I just think it's interesting, the guys that they offered, because they are different in their own ways. There are a few similarities, but there's also a lot of differences that to me maybe indicates Nebraska is going to adjust its offense to whoever they end up getting out of the portal.
Yeah, I think the offense is in a place where the quarterback can pretty much shape the offense. I don't think it's set in stone necessarily, because they don't have the pieces yet, and that intrigues me. Is what are they telling these quarterbacks? Who is the supporting cast going to be? I mean, I think they've got some holes they're going to fill in around the quarterback. Can the quarterback they bring in, can he make this team better? The guys around him better, or does he have to have better receivers, running backs, offensive line around him? It might be a little bit of both. But I'm intrigued a little bit by the money, because they were in on Raiola for a long time, and that wasn't going to be cheap, so they obviously were okay with that. So did that mean that they would get into a bidding war with Ohio State over Cam Ward? I don't think they would, but like you said, they have to have somebody on a quarterback in college football today, and maybe forever, is the number one piece on the board. It makes everything, if you want to go win 8-9 games, you better have a quarterback if you want to get to the next level. So yeah, they have to get this right, and we're all just sitting back watching.
For sure. I think that the names that the places they're going and the quarterbacks they're pursuing, though, does speak to the diligence of what they're doing. I'll give them that much. Like, they're trying. It's not a hey, we're gonna go very modest and just try to get a guy in here and develop him for a couple of years. I think they're trying anyway to get a player in here who might attract a receiver out of the portal as well. I think that's something to chew on is do they need more receivers? Do they need this? Do they need that? I do certainly scheme is helpful on the offensive side of the ball, but having players really helps too. And you got to ask yourself whether Nebraska has the kinds of receivers that can consistently get open. I think they're young, and so I think talent-wise they're getting there, but they have those guys in the roster. Do they have the running back that they want, who can hit the home run if he gets a crease? And do they have the quarterback who can get things done? And it's a work in progress for sure. And it moves a lot faster than it used to. Remember Tanner Lee? They were recruiting Tanner Lee for months back in 2017, and so this stuff all moves a lot faster than it used to. And it's speed dating. You've got to be able to sell them on your vision. You also have to sell a guy like Cam Ward or anybody on, here's what we've got on the roster, and here's how we're going to make you good. Here's what you can do for us, but here's what we can do for you. Because Cam Ward wants to go to the NFL. It's not just about money, but setting himself up for the league. I don't know. Sam Levitt probably doesn't have that many options. I mean, he's going to have to do what he's going to have to pick the best option. He's not in a position to make demands. Some of these other guys are. So it's I don't know. My general feeling is that Nebraska fans are like, yeah, heck yeah, good for Nebraska going after these guys. Why can't Nebraska have one of these guys? What's wrong with us? And so at least they're making the effort. I don't know if they're going to get him, but they are making an effort to say these are the players that we prioritize, and we're going to send our offensive coordinator out there, and he's going to make his pitch. Darn it! And so there you go.
Yeah, the timing piece is interesting to me too, and kind of like Tom said a little bit, like, what do you tell them in terms of who their quarterback coach is going to be? What do you tell them in terms of who they're going to have as skill players? Do you show them anything at all from the 2023 offense? Any film of that team at all? Or are you showing a bunch of South Carolina stuff from 2 years ago? I think that's the part that's interesting, is there doesn't appear to be a defined plan, at least that we saw this year. And maybe the coaches have hammered that out and they're able to articulate that. But I think it's also possible, again, that they are going to figure things out based on who they get, and that they don't know maybe who is going to be their quarterback's coach, if that's going to be restructured. It just feels like they're leaning on their confidence in being able to adapt to the talent that they have. And we saw that last year with their willingness to run the option and do these different things. It doesn't seem like they're necessarily married to a certain scheme or a certain way of doing things, which can be a good thing. But to your point, Sam, it'll just be fascinating to see who they end up with, because I think what they do on offense next year could be very, very much dictated by whoever that person is.
For sure. I think Satterfield's offense reminds me a lot of like the 49ers. When you kind of watch the designs of the plays, people who watch the 49ers play the Eagles on Sunday surely saw, what you call an end around, whatever you want to call it. That looked a lot like the plays Nebraska's run. It went for a touchdown as opposed to a 3-yard gain. But it seems similar to what the 49ers are doing. But the quarterbacks that they had last year, I guess other than a few moments with Chuba, didn't really resemble Brock Purdy at all. And Chuba doesn't play like his brother, to be honest with you, but they just didn't resemble him. Like Brock Purdy's a game manager, stays in the pocket, has a nice arm, throws the football, gets it to his playmakers. Nebraska's quarterbacks, other than a few moments with Chuba, they're outside the pocket making plays. It just seemed like a mismatch to me. And I thought the option was like a compromise of like, hey, let's try to get some things that these guys are good at. But when you do that, I think that option offense, A, has its limits because it does take, a lot of time and talent to execute, and B, get your quarterback jacked up and get him hurt. And it did. So, I don't think we'll see that component again. I feel like they want more of a backup, like a drop back quarterback who can throw the ball. And I don't know with Levitt. It's hard to know with Levitt, but most of these other guys kind of fit that. He fits that. He fits that mold. Do you think they'll have this resolved by the end of this week, or do you think it's going to go into next week?
I think it goes till next week. I think you get official visits involved, and you want to see a greater extent of the pool of candidates. Like I don't think we've seen everybody that's even going to be in there, right? Like Kyle McCord, who would have guessed a week ago that he would have been even a candidate? So I think it goes till next week, but that's based on like what we've seen the last 2 years and sort of the rhythm and the timing of how the portal has gone. But now it's a 30-day window instead of a 45-day window, and guys are entering it or declaring their intentions a week earlier than they did. So maybe it does happen this week. There's an urgency for quarterbacks to take those spots and for schools to fill those roles. And you don't know. Like, I feel like it'll be next week, but maybe some of these players are hearing what they want to hear now and they'll pull the trigger.
Maybe they are. Go ahead.
Who knows?
Yeah. Evan, I was interested too in the NIL part of this. Nebraska's got a history of I guess taking care of the quarterbacks. I mean, we heard Casey Thompson got a nice deal, and obviously I took care of Jeff Sims last year. So there is a history there. The other guys in the team have had things. The Polar Bear's got a commercial. So I just wonder
Oh,
if, and there's other athletes, Jordy Ball, the volleyball players. I mean, you look around if you're a quarterback and, you see the fan base is all in on Nebraska football, and there's opportunities here. I think that's gonna be a pretty good selling point, especially that Nebraska's not been afraid to go into those waters, so to speak. So I think that whoever 1890 is and whoever is behind the curtain doing all this stuff, I'm sure it's they've got a game plan.
I want to try to play an exercise here for a second just to get a sense of the college football playoff for 23 is set, and it's 4 teams, but next year it's going to be 12. And Nebraska was really never close to being in the 14 playoffs since the inception of the playoff. There were a few moments where they were within smelling distance of 12. In 2014, they were in the top something, I think 11 when they lost to Wisconsin. And in 2016, they were in the top 10 when they lost to Wisconsin. Now, obviously, neither one of those teams ended up being anywhere near where the playoff would have been, but there was a moment in time when they would have been ranked in the top 12. And obviously, going next year, you're going to see teams that are ranked 12th playing in the college football playoff, probably at the SEC runner-up or whatever. But I thought it would be interesting to kind of step aside the controversy this year. That won't be a controversy next year. It just won't. The 4 and 5 will not be a controversy. There might be a little bit of whatever around 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And I'm going to rattle those off now. And just, these are teams that 2 of these teams would have made the playoff. 4 of them wouldn't have. 3 of them wouldn't have. How close is Nebraska to these teams? And one of the things to pay close attention to here is the quarterbacks. So number 11, Ole Miss, number 12, Oklahoma, number 13, LSU, number 14, Arizona, and number 15, Louisville. Only one of those teams played in their conference title game. That was Louisville. So there you go. Those are the teams. Of those teams, do you think Nebraska's anywhere near the teams that I just rattled off?
Well, not right now, but that can change in a hurry. I mean, it doesn't take long. I mean, it's certainly not like basketball where you just get one guy, but if you get the right quarterback and you fill in a few of the blanks, I mean, I don't see why year 3 or 4, I couldn't be up there. I mean, what I think is going to happen is it's the 12 spots are going to fill up. There's going to be 5 conference champions, right? It's not 6, it's 5.
Correct.
So you're going to have 7 at large. I think the majority of those 7 at large are going to be SEC and the Big Ten. I got into an argument with Greg Sharp about this. He thinks the Big 12 is going to be just fine. I've said, I don't know. I think the Big 12 is. You look at this year's top 10. It didn't have anybody close. But so who knows? In the ACC, I mean, look what just happened. I mean, they lost to the SEC in this thing. So I think Nebraska's trying to get into that top 4 of the Big Ten. And everybody in the league is going to be trying to get in that top 4 because that'll give you a shot. And I think there's any arguments or debates or any, I don't think it'll be a controversy. But at the last spot in and the first spot out are probably going to be a debate between the number 2 team in the Big 12 or ACC versus the number 3 or 4 team in the SEC or Big 10. And, who deserves to be, and so, but I think Nebraska's not that, people are talking about, the schedule is going to be so tough. It's a different perspective. When Nebraska's up and running and they're good, they're as good as Washington and Oregon. I mean, historically, they've been better than those teams when they're up and running. They haven't been up and running in years. But when they get the recruiting going, get the coaching going, get the people in place, they could get some dudes out there and they're going to be right there with everybody. I mean, maybe not at Georgia, but they won't be far behind. You just got to go do it. And so, and yeah, it's hard to go through the Big Ten. It'll be hard to do it, but it won't seem like it's like this insurmountable task if you've got players. I mean, the perspective around here will change if and when they start winning, and they just got to get to that point.
I guess what I would add too is of those teams that you mentioned, Sam. I mean, Louisville made a coaching change this year, and they were an okay team. I think 8-5 a year ago. Arizona was sub 500. They were 5-7 a year ago, and now they're where they are. So a quarterback can make a difference. Coaching can make a difference. Like, I still think, Nebraska fans continue to be jaded by the experience of some of these previous head coaches. And, if Rule does what he's done at other places, like, there's no reason to think that they can't be competitive next year, being a potentially a ranked team if they upgrade and luck bounces their way a little better and they cut down on the giveaways. Like, you see these kind of turnarounds in college football every year. And again, you're not talking about going 12-0. You're talking about going 10-2 and getting a few bounces and winning those close games and having the depth to manage some injuries. Like, I don't think that's insurmountable. What's interesting to me is being in the top 12 that much more far-fetched than what their previous goal had been, which was try to win the West, and then you get a one-game shot at winning the Big Ten and seeing what happens from there. Like, I don't know how different necessarily those two goals are. Like, if you're the West champ, you're probably at least in that conversation anyway. So I don't know. I just think there's enough case studies every year of teams that make that jump. And you look at how resourced Nebraska is, and the guys that are now in charge. Like, I just don't see why that's such an unattainable goal.
That's interesting. I'd have to look this up, and I'm doing it right now. You made the statement about if you're the West champion, you were in position to be in the top 12. Is that
You'd at least be in the conversation? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, you got to win the game, which they never did. Yeah, the last time a team was in the top 10 in the West going into that game was Wisconsin in 2019. Northwestern was 14th in 2020. Iowa was 13th, so they were in the conversation in 2021.
This year's Iowa team.
Purdue was not ranked, and Iowa was 16th in the CFP going in. So yeah, like presume you got to win the game, which they never did. But I understand the point of what you're making is that you'd go there and then you would win the game. For sure. I don't know that any West team is going to be playing for the Big Ten championship going forward. If you were going to ask me to rank the likelihood of teams playing for the Big Ten championship going forward, the list would start with Ohio State, then Michigan, then Penn State, then Oregon, then USC, then probably Washington, and then probably the first team in the West. So I think Tom's point about making the top 4 of the Big Ten is a great one. I think if you get to 10-2 in this newfangled Big Ten, you've got an entry point. But I also think your point about Arizona is a really good one too. They were 5-7 last year, and they're knocking on the door of the playoff. And how'd they do that? Well, I can tell you that, and again, do these things interconnect? Are they like, is it definitive? No, this isn't like galaxy brain stuff. But, LSU threw 41 touchdown passes. They're 13th in this list. Arizona threw 34. And what are they, 14th? Right?
Yeah.
Oklahoma threw 32. And they're 12th. Who was 11th? Ole Miss? Ole Miss. Yeah. They didn't throw as many. I can't remember exactly what they threw. Louisville threw 22. And I don't know exactly what Ole Miss threw. But the bottom line is all of these teams could throw the ball. I mean, they all have competent quarterback play. Jackson Dart was a very nice quarterback in the SEC. Let's see. Ole Miss, Ole Miss threw 23 touchdown passes, but they threw for 3,319 yards and 9.4 yards per attempt. And we'll kind of go through this stuff in the offseason and kind of unpack it for people to kind of get an understanding of what is the playoff team's profile. What did they do to get there? Because the new goal for Nebraska football is making the playoff. There is no West Division title. The playoff is going to be the thing. And at some point in the next 4 or 5 years, I would expect that Nebraska would expect to be there. And that would be an expectation that they would have. So that'll be something to look at. It's just kind of a fun exercise. I think Tom's point about being in the top 4 in the Big Ten, exactly. That's not going to be easy to do.
Well, it's a thing that for the older set like me, saw Nebraska do that every year. I mean, it's going to be a deal where the teams that make the playoff are going to have to hit the portal right. Okay, you have to get, because these quarterbacks are leaving. They're leaving winning programs. So a lot of these playoff type teams might be changing quarterbacks a lot. I don't know. I mean, you just don't know. So you got to get the right quarterback. I mean, in any given year, and then everybody else is good too. So for Nebraska, you're trying to make the playoff. I don't want to say once or twice every 10 years, but it ain't gonna happen every year. I mean, it's going to be hard to do. So it might happen 3 out of 4 years. You can't go into that, thinking it's going to be all the time. So there's going to be a level of, I guess, patience or maybe perspective on the fan base. But that's everywhere, because it's a rich man's game. We're seeing Charlie Baker set the new rules yesterday. The NCAA finally did something or said something, and going forward, I mean, this thing it might change in 4 or 5 years. There might be an upper level of the NCAA FBS that has its own playoff. I mean,
yes,
you just don't know. So, but it's a situation, I think, where Nebraska can certainly do it, but you're going to have to hit a lot of things right. But that's going to be everybody, whether it's Texas A&M or Florida State or USC. You're going to have to hit the portal right, and you're going to have to just have one of those years where it all falls together, because it ain't easy. And winning that conference it's going to take everything you can do to do that. But anyway,
no, you're completely right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to take everything. Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you play for the conference, you're going to be in the playoffs. Like, it almost nullifies the point of the Big Ten title game, because you almost but they're going to be in the playoff. If you're playing for the Big Ten championship, you're in the playoff.
But I wonder, Sam, if that's going to be true. I wonder if the first time somebody plays for a conference championship game and they lose and they get knocked out of the playoff. I mean, I don't think that would happen, but we don't know. Would they then get rid of conference championship games? Well, this is too risky, and we don't really care who our champion is. We can decide it by standings. We don't want to risk a team losing and the committee saying, "Well, you just lost a game by 30 in your championship game. I'm sorry." We don't want to risk that. So this is all going to be uncharted territory.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility where you have a 3-way tie. Just for argument's sake, there's a possibility where you have a 3-way tie in the Big Ten for second, and you have one team at 9-0, and for whatever reason, you have 3 teams at 7-2, and the team that wins the tiebreaker to go to whatever is actually a 9-3, 7-2 team, and the other teams above them are 11-1 or whatever it is, or 10-2. Yeah, so that could happen. I would be surprised if it happened very often. My sense is that your number 2 team in the Big Ten will be 8-1, but it could for sure. And it would absolutely, you're talking about the Big 12 runner up. That's going to be the thing every year. Is it the number 2 team in the Big 12? How out of 16 teams, how many what's their record going to be? How good are they going to be? Is that league just going to kind of beat each other up the way the Pac-12 did, and so they only end up with 1 team in the playoff? That's possible for sure.
Yeah, I just thinking if you don't want to go to the conference championship game and you're thinking you're in good shape either way, but then you get blown out, and all of a sudden, the earthquake happens somewhere in other conferences where other upsets, and all of a sudden you're sitting there going, "Well, I thought we were good, but we just lost by 35." And then now somebody else got our spot. So I just think the conference championship games, you got to keep an eye on that to see, are they going to be worth it?
I think the whole climate, again, just speaks to the urgency to kind of bring it full circle that Nebraska has to have. Right now, if you're not in the playoff, okay, you're not one of the 4 teams, you didn't win your conference. Next year, like we've said, making a bowl game won't have the same sort of feeling of accomplishment, right? Like if you're not one of the top 12, it feels like all the other bowls are going to diminish in notoriety. It changes the vibe of things, and relegation is not a thing in college football, but it kind of feels like, if you don't hold up your end of the bargain, you're going to get left behind with some of the TV contracts and the eyeballs that are out there. It changes. I think it just changes the tenor of things, where you can't rely on building this thing over 3 and 4 years. You have to be in the mix, interesting, as soon as next year. And I think that speaks to why they're so intent on that portal spot, because doesn't that seem like that's kind of the formula now? Like, get the quarterback spot right and then figure everything else out. Like that's what Michigan did. That's what Washington did. You can kind of just go down the line. If you figure that spot out, you can build the rest of it through development, through the portal. But man, you got to get that first part right. Nebraska has to get that part right now.
Yep.
Well said. To basketball briefly. There's not much time for Nebraska to dwell on the Creighton loss. It wasn't Nebraska's best performance. It wasn't, and they didn't play well. Creighton played well in many ways for most of the game. Creighton wins 89-60. Creighton looks like, when Creighton hits shots, they look like a Final Four team. So Nebraska now plays Minnesota tonight. They play Michigan State on Sunday. I don't have to spend much time saying that these two games are bigger than the Creighton game, right, Tom?
Absolutely. And if you're Nebraska, you have to take it. I know that's an emotional deal, and everybody, the fans were disappointed. They left early. There were just emotions all over the court. It didn't look good, but you have to take into account that, yeah, it's your rival, but your rival is a Final Four caliber team. That when they go off, and they do it every game, nobody in the country can stop that. So they're as good as anybody in the country, and so don't worry about it. You're not. Don't worry about it. This is still a Nebraska team that can make the tournament, but they've got it. This is a big week for them. Probably need to sweep this week. They need to start piling up the conference wins. I think they're still in shape to go 9-2 non-conference. That's really good for them. I don't care who they played, just get to 9-2. I watched K-State last night. Can they beat them down there? Maybe no. K-State was pretty good against Nova, and their old buddy Arthur Kaluma is really playing well. I thought he would. I thought that coach would really, get him going, and he has. It's taken a while, but yeah, Nebraska's got a lot going for them, and the Big Ten is, it's weird. You get Northwestern beating Purdue. You've got, Michigan, Wisconsin beat Michigan State last night, and Wisconsin was weird for a while, and I don't think anybody's great. I think Purdue's great, but the
At
top,
home. At
yeah,
home, they're great.
I mean, yeah. So I don't think this is an impossible deal. But they've got to play smarter than they did last Sunday, and they've got to get the two big men going, and they've got to shoot well, play defense, all that fun stuff. It's a team set up to do well in the Big Ten. It's older, it's mature, it's versatile, and it's got big guys who, if you got to get physical, they can do it. So I still like them. I think, but they got to go do it. And yeah, you don't have to worry about the Creighton game. It's Creighton's that good, and just it happens. So now go take care of business.
Indiana beat Michigan at Michigan last night too. I think Indiana's a better team than Michigan. Michigan's now 4-5, but there's been some early upsets. I don't know if that's an upset, but that's Michigan's a hard place to play. I think Nebraska's got a real opportunity to beat Michigan State on Sunday. I don't think it's a great Michigan State team. Nebraska has had very little success against Michigan State since Hoiberg took over. None, actually. The success level is 0. Miles beat him 3 times, I think, but Hoiberg is not. Minnesota is the team that I believe Hoiberg has beaten the most since joining the Big Ten. Minnesota and maybe Rutgers. And so this is an opportunity tonight. I do worry a little bit about this one, though. They got a guy that, in Dawson Garcia, was a pretty good player. And honestly, best player on the court. I think he's better than anybody Nebraska's got. And sometimes in basketball, the team that's got the best player has a slight advantage. I don't even know what the line is tonight. But I think it's going to be a good basketball game. I really do. I don't think Nebraska's going to run away with it. Let's see what the line is here. Nebraska's a 1.5-point favorite. So there you go. It's going to be a close one. We'll see. If they're 7-4 and 0-3 in the Big Ten, or 0-2 in the Big Ten, or whatever, 7-3 and 0-2 in the Big Ten. Sorry about that. If they're 7-3 and 0-2 in the Big Ten by next week, it won't stun me, but it will feel like a setback. And the first NAT ratings came out on Sunday, and they were 76, and that's not where they wanted to be. So winning the next 2 would be huge.
Yeah. I agree.
Right. We'll see what happens tonight. That's a late one tonight, 8 o'clock, 5:30 on Sunday. Okay, that is our Pick 6 podcast for this week. For Tom and Evan, I'm Sam. We may have a quick reaction later this week if Nebraska lands a portal QB, but we'll definitely talk about a portal QB next week on the Pick 6 podcast. I won't be surprised if Nebraska has somebody by then. Thanks, Husker fans.